Hello and welcome to a very special edition of the Spirit of Fire blog tour. And today it is a great honor of mine to be on the Jess Resides Here blog. So I have done some very special preparations for today's blog because I wouldn't want to do anything less than just spectacular for Jess. So first thing is, just in case we get hungry, I have made a plate of bacon, as you can see. So I know Chris at the Cabin Goddess will definitely approve, but we will start with a plate of bacon. And of course, to wash it down, I went into my vintage cellars. And of course, as you know, I'm a Monster connoisseur, and so I've got my very last can of Monster Heavy Metal. Yes, Monster Heavy Metal limited edition, which can't really be found too much anymore. And this is my final can, and I've been saving it for a special occasion. And right here, I'm going to pop my last can from my vintage cellars of Monster Heavy Metal. That's great stuff. And then, in addition to that, because I do need to keep my throat kind of wet because I'm going to be doing a reading today, Jess, of course, has been telling me about the looming zombie apocalypse. So I just want to let her know that even though I'm going to be concentrating on this, I am prepared in case the zombie apocalypse breaks out. So I brought with me my Uruk-hai blade, this replica sword from the Lord of the Rings movie, and someday I'd like to get a Trogan long blade replica, but Trogan long blade be a little bit longer than this one and a little bit broader of a blade, and it'd have a little bit of a curving profile. But for right now, just in case the zombie apocalypse breaks out, I have my Uruk-hai replica long blade to take care of me. So Jess, this one's for you, and I'm ready for the zombie apocalypse, and I have my bacon. So now I am prepared to get underway. We have a few questions that Jess wants me to tackle, and then I'll be doing a reading from Spirit of Fire. So Jess asked me first, what is the hardest part of publishing, the part that the reader just doesn't know about? Well, imagine J.R.R. Tolkien or C.S. Lewis tweeting or doing Facebook status updates or blogs or Google+. Basically, the hardest part about publishing today is that you have to spend so much time just trying to raise awareness about the work that you do, the books that you have, because the blessing and the curse about the modern publishing climate, especially with ebooks, is that the barrier is easy. Pretty much anybody can put a title out there, but that means on the other end of the spectrum, and any band can tell you this with what they went through, and filmmakers can tell you this, is that there's just a flood of material that occurs when it's pretty easy to put something up into the market. And so, I think the hardest thing with millions of titles out there and thousands of new ones coming out all the time, you just have an ocean of stuff, and it's like, even the bloggers like Jess and Chris at the Cabin Goddess can tell you, they get inundated with requests. Their to-be-read piles are high, so it's very hard to even get a slot with a blog reviewer. So I think that's one of the hardest things for a writer or publisher today, because I also, any good self-published author treats it like a publishing operation, and just raising awareness and doing all the hours of social networking and book promotions and all the little things that you have to do today, I think are definitely the hardest part. And like I said, it does crack me up when I think of like C.S. Lewis putting out daily tweets or status updates. But the next question Jess asked is, how do you go about writing characters that are very different from yourself? Is your approach different? Is it more difficult to write? Most of my characters are very different from myself, and I've been lucky that I've done a lot of diverse things in my existence. I've done everything from working in a cancer research lab to working at a fitness center. Believe it or not, I used to be in great shape up until about my college years, and toward the end of high school up to my college years, and I got into doing some work at a gym. I used to also work with independent record label and a bunch of different things that got me in contact with a broad range of types of people. Everything from definite millionaire businessmen and politician types to just rock bands and things like that. And from that, I think there was a great education on characters. And so I draw off of all the different kinds of personalities and people that I meet. I may not base a character directly off anybody, but definitely a lot of characters have influences ranging from the various types of personalities that I've encountered, the various types of individuals that I've had the pleasure of being around, and friends and so forth. And so that old author adage of "be careful or you'll be in my next novel" is actually true in a lot of ways. So yeah, we do draw off of our personal experience for that. Let's say you have a day all to yourself, no writing, no publishing work, no million emails to answer. Yeah, she actually understands what I go through. How do you spend that day? Okay, well, if I had the resources to do so, I would go to either an ocean or a mountain setting. I love the mountains. I would love to, just spend a day hiking in the mountains if I was there. If I was on the ocean, I would like to go deep sea fishing, perhaps do a little afternoon of scuba diving, and then, who knows, maybe take a lady friend to a romantic dinner in the evening on a beachfront type setting. So that would be the ideal way that I would like to spend my day. Unfortunately, right now it just doesn't quite work like that. So maybe an afternoon of just not having to worry about anything and getting to go to a movie, or just spending time with some friends or something like that is probably that's more of a big gift to me right now with how busy and crazy and tough my current lifestyle is. Okay, she wants me to talk about Fandom Fest and my convention experiences and what it's like meeting people face to face. I love meeting my readers face to face. I think that's the best thing about conventions, why I do them. I like introducing my work to new people, but I also like to get to see the people that are reading my work in a personal setting, and that's what drives me to go to a lot of conventions. And Fandom Fest is definitely something that's very personal to me because Ken and Myra gave me the opportunity. They're the founders of Fright Night Fandom Fest, and they gave me the opportunity to run a literary track at it, and it's grown. This is going to be its second year, coming up June 29th to July 1st, and we've got a big one with 140 panels and workshops and over 110 author panelists. We've got just amazing best-selling authors like Timothy Zahn, John Scalzi, Robin Hobb, Richard Cadre, Ernest Cline, Angie Fox, Julie Kagawa, Jim C. Hines. I mean, we've just got a phenomenal list of people that are coming to this event, and so I'm really, really excited. I mean, and that's only the tip of the iceberg. I mean, they've got all kinds of film guests, Bruce Campbell and John Rhys Davies and Sean Astin and media guests, and gaming. Got a great game track. I mean, it's just got everything for everybody, and I'm really, really excited about that because it's always fun to go to like a multimedia kind of event that has different factions and sectors, and it's got something for everybody. And so June 29th and July 1st in Louisville, I'm really looking forward to doing that. And the convention environments are almost like its own world, and in a lot of ways. And so it's like often you see a lot of the same like a lot of the same authors and vendors travel to a lot of them. So in a way, it's kind of like every time you do a convention, there's like a little bit of a mini reunion going on. You get to catch up in person, with a lot of your friends who are also authors in the business, other publishers, and all kinds of wonderful people. And so I really enjoy doing conventions, and it certainly is a thrill to meet a reader face to face that I haven't had the opportunity to do so yet. Somebody I maybe only know off Facebook or something like that. It's a real thrill to actually get to meet them in person because nothing beats the real thing. You can't ever replace that. So. Okay, she asked me how to pronounce the names of characters and places in the series. Okay, the best word of advice I can get is just kind of sound it out with mine. I try not to make them too complicated. You've got like the Trogans and Fermorg and Dragol and Goras and all those type of names. Some of them get a little stranger, like when I go to the Saxony, I have a lot of Anglo-Saxon types of names like Athelstan and Aelfric and names of that type. But just generally just try to sound them out because in most cases you'll be able to pronounce them if you just kind of sound out the words like for instance with the five realms, Deganawida, is one, the great Sachem, who you meet, in Crown of Vengeance, and of course the younger warrior war Sachem, Ianwatha. But follow the way they're spelled, and generally I think you'll be doing pretty well. The one I get questioned on a lot is actually the title of the world itself. And I know that Hannah, another great blogger out there, was recently asking me about that herself. She's from Once Upon a Time, but it's pronounced Ave, and like Ave Maria. And so I love that kind of graceful sounding name. It's kind of a salutation or greeting in Latin. Kind of almost is like the word hail, it's like hail and light. I wanted this world untainted, before the Great War with Jabelos and the Allfather. I wanted this to be kind of like the out of oblivion. This is the hail to existence and creation. So Ave is something that that I chose. It's probably the one that I get the most questions about sounding out, but it's actually a direct kind of Latin word. So. Okay, and Jessica's next question is, as a reader, when reading a big book with lots of story and characters, it's not always easy to keep track of. So how do you do it with 2 series in the works and writing a book for each series in alternating years? Do you have to refresh because it's your own creation, or are they simply always there in your mind? For me, writing 2 series has actually turned out to be a benefit. And so when I go back to the Rising Dawn saga, for instance, it's like I've gotten a reset, and it's a lot fresher, and I can see things that I would not necessarily be able to see so easily if I just did book 1, book 2, book 3, and just kind of continued down that path. So for me, the 2 stories are entirely distinctive. So when I go into each world, it's like I immerse in it, and once I'm underway with the writing of it, everything kind of takes form, and it's in my head. And I kind of get in that groove. So for me, keeping them straight is not that bad. I do keep, kind of notes on both worlds and the characters and so forth. I do keep extensive notes on them, just in case I need just to check a certain detail reference or something that's minor, not necessarily intrinsic to the whole story, but some detail, like, because I don't want them changing eye color or something like that in midstream. So for me, it's not that bad to do that. And so I enjoy writing, 2 series is kind of in that alternating style. So now to round it out, I'm going to be doing a reading from Spirit of Fire. So I thought I'd actually go from the beginning and give you a sense of some of the tension that's in it, and some of the things that some of our main ensemble is having to face. So I'm going to read to you from a section that deals with an Archimon, and an Archimon is a being that's actually been summoned from a kind of abyss, hellish kind of region, and they're kind of like almost like generals for the Unifier, or even higher than generals. They're like the main lieutenants in a way, and so that's what an Archimon is, and he is currently with part of the invasion forces that are working their way into Saxony in this scene. So we'll go from here. The glowing embers of the Archimon's gaze were fixed upon the mass of individuals handling the makeshift network of ropes and pulley-driven cranes, the latter similar to those used on ships at quays to lower the giant cages. The Archimon's grotesque winged steed, scaly, sinuous, and serpentine, followed its master's every directive with rigid discipline. It was now brooding and silent, patiently awaiting its master's next command. Though the shrouded figure appeared impassive to all eyes, a mounting impatience was welling up within the Archimon. Of the 4 of its kind loosed at a tremendous expenditure of energy from the fiery depths of Jabelos' realm, 2 were now aiding the assaults upon the Saxon kingdom. That alone reflected the tremendous importance the Unifier placed upon subjugation of the Saxon lands. The invasion was a pivotal element of the final series of conquests, which would bring all of Ave under one authority, outwardly that of the Unifier, though truly, through the Unifier, Jabelos. The Archimon's fury had soared throughout the report informing of the sudden Ungehur attack, which had blunted the Avenoran efforts to break through to the northeast of the plains of Athelney. The force should have been able to hook around through the mountains, to pour down and ambush the main Saxon forces on their exposed right flank, out on the plains of Athelney. The worst aspect of it was that the Saxon ranks arrayed to oppose the Avenoran maneuver had been dislodged and broken, leaving the way clear for all aims to be achieved. All had been thwarted by a horde from a brutish race that now held the Archimon's malefic ire. At the moment, the battle at the plains of Athelney should have been over, and the interior of the Saxon lands left wide open. The kingdom of Saxony had likely exhausted itself in the musters for the plains of Athelney and for the smaller force deployed to face the woodland incursion. Unlike the Trogans, humans, and others around it, the Archimon knew much about the Ungehur. The primitive creatures had emerged from the depths of their underworld dominion, having been well hidden from the extensive scouting from the skies and on the land. The human and Trogan leaders had been confounded. To the few that had even heard of the underground race, the Ungehor existed only within legends or as wisps of tales. Things of legend and myth were certainly not foremost on the minds of the invasion forces' command. In a practical sense, the existence of an underground population of Ungehor right under Saxon lands was something entirely unknown and altogether unaccounted for. Nevertheless, the Archimonde had confronted many of the Avenoran lords after the terrible debacle. Its dark presence had driven each one of the fierce, haughty commanders to become sniveling, groveling fools in mere moments. Mortals confronted by an immortal form from the afterworld itself, its very existence boggling to their minds, several had broken out in cold sweats. Others had openly trembled, unable to stifle the terror racking their spirits. Failure, for any reason, was never to be taken lightly, whether in the infernal realms or in Ave. The Archimonde had faced the Avenoran lords as if they were going to be made to answer fully for the considerable losses. Using mystical arts in the abyssal depths, the Archimonde implanted stark images directly into the minds of the Avenoran lords, one by one. Shadows of madness, visions of monstrosities and chasms of sentient blackness, and searing vistas of blood-drenched infernos filled the thoughts of the Avenoran lords as they were given the briefest glimpses into the nether kingdom of Jabelos. They were unable to avoid the terrifying spectacles by shutting their eyes, forced to endure the waking nightmares for what threatened to be an interminable ordeal. A couple openly wept, others shook as the cold sweat streaked down their faces, and still others collapsed to the ground in quivering, sobbing heaps. The Archimonde knew their minds were not equipped to handle such sights for very long. After their humiliating, terrifying experience had reached the very edge of a place from where it could not return, on the brink of madness, the Archimonde finally and suddenly withdrew its hellish grip. The entity consigned the horrific visions to the subconscious regions of their minds. The Archimonde knew every thought going through their minds as they were loosed. The seeds of many future sleepless, nightmare-flooded nights had been sown, but the Avenorans had blinked and gasped in surprise and relief as they were released. They quickly regained their focus, but found to their great agitation they had absolutely no recollections of the previous several moments. For them it was as if time itself had skipped forward. Greatly disconcerted, their hearts still beat rapidly as an icy fear danced on the edges of their awareness. The Archimonde had then turned immediately to the issue set before all of them, breaking the defenses of the Saxons and those that aided them. Whether the main invasion force had broken through or not out on the plains of Athelney, it was advantageous for the Avenorans to secure an open passage into the northern lands of the Saxon kingdom. The Ungehor were the only real threat standing in their way. To confront them and root them out from their underground domain, the Archimonde quickly settled upon a strategy that would exact a terrible vengeance in the process of achieving their aims. A summons had been sent by way of another of the Archimonde's dark, mysterious arts back to Avelos itself. 2 young Durocs were being harnessed shortly thereafter, on open grounds just outside of the great city. Though not fully trained, the pair of Durocs were the only ones out of the Unifier's brood not currently committed elsewhere. A small crew of fiercely loyal, carefully selected Avenoran warriors had then guided the giant winged beast to a faraway hidden place. It was a location known to very few, and all of those were beholden to the Unifier and Jabelos. To assault something of the underworld, the Archimonde had chosen to send something from the darkest depths of the underworld. The creatures granted to the bidding of the Archimonde were not entirely unknown to the surface world. Their subterranean kind had risen up before, making their presence known many times over the long ages of the world of Ave. They had reached the surface through deep lakes and rivers, ascending from the gaping depths of the underworld itself, becoming creatures of great myths and legends themselves. 2 of the creatures had been obtained to serve the Archimonde's bidding, each one of them a veritable juggernaut. Their bodies were akin to enormous serpents, covered with hardened scales that were collectively as good as a solid sheath comprised of the finest crafted armor. Of massive girth, their bodies were as thick as the trunks of the oldest, largest trees in all of the Saxon forests. Neither of the fully grown monstrosities was less than 70 feet in length. Their appearance was also as beautiful as it was terrifying. The scales forming their natural armor were themselves comprised of a variety of vibrant colors, amid others that seemed to blaze like tongues of fire when caught by the light. The deadly beauty reached its pinnacle atop their great heads. As of kings and queens among the ancient race of snakes, they were crowned with natural diadems. Great, sharply pointed horns sprouted up from each side of their massive heads. In the center of their broad craniums, at the forward end of a fiery red crest, was what looked to be a radiant sparkling crystal, bisected by a prominent blood-red streak. Their enormous heads contained a gaping maw lined with an arsenal of spiking rear-curving teeth, forming an inescapable prison for anything caught within the creature's awesome bite. Two massive fangs, like gleaming deadly sabers being pulled from scabbards, extended downward whenever the creature opened its mouth with the intent to strike. Just a few tiny drops of venom from one of the creature's fangs is more than enough to kill the strongest of humans. One full injection from the dual fangs imparted a comparative torrent of lethal poison, which no living creature on the surface of Ave could withstand. In the abysmal depth reaches of the underworld, the beasts could pass through great depths of water, navigate the most powerful of currents, and weather the greatest turbulence. Their bodies could handle great extremes of temperature and withstand exceptional pressures. On solid ground, they moved with tremendous bursts of speed, dizzying to behold. There were very few creatures in all of Ave that had the kind of size and power to even stand a chance to contend with the colossal serpents, and most of them were now regarded in a mythical state themselves. Yet they were not invincible, having one major place of vulnerability on their bodies. Located 7 spots in the base of their heads was a susceptible point where a solid penetrating strike could instantly incapacitate the giant beasts. The knowledge of the location was largely delegated to obscure lore, known currently only to a few handfuls of people whose ancestors had encountered the horror of the deadly creatures in past times. The Uctina were virtually without rival, exactly the kind of formidable creature the Archimon could use to beset their underground adversaries. In a shrouding darkness, secure from the reach of the sun, the Unifier was keeping a number of the fearsome creatures. Tended closely by the Unifier's sorcerers, the Uctina were controllable. Using their secret arts, the sorcerers had lulled the creatures into a deep, trance-like slumber before a cadre of highly unnerved Gigans had laboriously gotten them into the lengthy cages. The creatures had not stirred in the least as the cages were then mounted up onto the young Durok's backs, but the huge flying beasts instantly sensed the nature of their deadly passengers. It took a highly concerted effort from their flyers and sorcerers alike just to calm the surge of agitation in the Duroks. The titanic steeds rumbled and snorted, loosing short, sporadic bursts of fire, even after they had been brought under an outward semblance of control. 2 of the exalted sorcerers of Avalos accompanied the beasts on the ensuing journey, keeping the Uctina in an unconscious state throughout the entire flight. At the moment, a sorcerer attended each cage as they were tediously lowered and angled off the backs of the Duroks. Under the increasing weight of the Archimon's spectral gaze, a small host of men and Trogans, augmented by horses, and a pair of the powerful Gigans continued to strain with ropes secured to the cages. The wood of their assembled cranes creaked and groaned with an unnerving tenor. The ropes taut as the tremendous weight of their burden drew the hempen cording to the limits. Just alongside each team, the stoic form of a sorcerer kept a wary eye out for even the slightest sign that the Uctina might be awakening from their deep slumber. The Archimon paid no heed to the nerve-racked state of those handling the cages, who feared that the serpentine monsters could be roused at any moment by the jostles, shakes, heaves, and lurches that the enclosures endured. The noise generated by the effort was considerable as well, as both man and animal grunted in their exertion, and those in authority shouted out orders whenever sudden adjustments were needed. When the cages were completely free from the Duroks and were finally resting upon the ground, the handlers mounted the huge sky beasts and guided them away from the lakeside. The 2 creatures were given a wide berth as they lumbered forward, many scrambling in haste to avoid being caught in the titanic beast's path. The agitation in the Duroks, which had emanated ever since they had taken to the skies with their fearsome burden, and finally ebbed as they gained distance between themselves and the cage's occupants. Yet the Duroks' gazes were turned to lock upon the extended contraptions when their handlers drew them to a halt and allowed them to lie upon the ground again. Like a shadowy wraith, the dark figure on the rise then spurred its scaly steed to flight and glided down to land close to one of the cages. A number of men and Trogan shuddered reflexively as if an icy chill had abruptly fallen upon them. With the Duroks in their place, the Archimon signaled for the cages to be fully disassembled. Only the Archimon could have elicited the assiduous response of the apprehensive laborers, transcending the grave dread that permeated the vicinity of the cages. Trogans and humans opened the locks that secured iron chain links running between the long modular segments of the great cages. Slowly the sides of the cage sections were lowered to their hinges, the latter affixed at the bottom. The dropping of the sides bared the lengthy, gigantic forms within to the eyes of all gathered, exposing the bodies of the Uctina to a host of individuals seeing the creatures in their entirety for the very first time. Expressions of fear and awe filled the faces of the hushed observers. Only the terrified whinnies and stamps of the frightened horses broke the silence as their handlers labored to keep the wide-eyed equines under control. The Archimonde felt no pity for what the Ungeheuer were about to be subjected to. In his view, the Ungeheuer should have stayed huddled below the surface and let the matters of the surface world take their own course. The Unifier would probably have even tolerated the existence of the foolish creatures if they had chosen to remain sequestered away from the upper world. Their fateful decision to take the side of the Saxons in the war was now going to bring a terrible wrath down upon them. The Ungeheuer had reaped the lethal harvest of what they had sown. Two immense serpentine forms, now still, would soon be brought back to full awareness. It would not be much longer before the Ungeheuer were introduced to two creatures of legend and experienced what they were capable of. The Archimonde savored the thoughts of the Ungeheur's impending doom with malice-drenched pleasure. And so that concludes the reading that I'm going to give you a little teaser about some things to come in Spirit of Fire. And my throat's a little dry here, so I got to get another drink of the Monster Heavy Metal here. But I'd like to thank you very much for listening to the reading, and thank you, Jess. It was definitely an honor to be here at Jess Resides Here, and hope you enjoyed my fun incidentals that I prepared for today, and look forward to the next time that I will hopefully be at Jess Resides Here. Thank you very much.